voir dire, which means on his face. And the purpose of this is that each side in a criminal case, they get challenges. They don't just have to have a jury. People that come in are prospective jurors. They're called the veneer. And they get to ask you questions, and based on how you answer them, each side gets what they call peremptory challenges, where they can kick you off for no reason. They'll just say, Mr. Ben, Mr. Snugger, thank you for showing up. Appreciate your service. And you leave. And because they're going to try, the facts never change in the case. They're usually pretty well established. Every once we on TV, they show everything as, the facts are in question. But that's not really reality. And so, and this is an actual case that I tried, to be honest with you. So the facts, Rick recognized it the minute he read the case scenario. This is Rick Calson. He's my law partner at the law firm. He's been an attorney for over 40 years. He's going to be great at it, not me. So, cases usually on each side there are problems. There's proof problems, not enough evidence, for a sure conviction. A lot of cases are like that, and this is one of them. That's why they end up going to trial. If you have a really solid case, they'll take a plea bargain and leave. So you don't really, if you have them with videotape of them doing something bad and a confession, typically those cases never go to trial. So the cases that you end up trying are always the ones that are on the fence. They can go either way. And so this is one of those cases. I'll read you a little bit of the scenario of what this is. And then I get to go first on voir dire. So what I'm doing is asking you, but what I'm asking you is things that would exclude you statutorily. Certain people cannot serve on a jury. So I'll be asking you if you've ever been convicted of a felony. Are you a citizen of the United States? Things like that. Because by statute, there are things that will exclude you. And then I'll go through a list of the witnesses that will testify and the names of the attorneys and ask you if you know any of these people. And if you do, how do you know them? So we'll go through that little part. But that's all I'm worried about is things that would exclude you statutorily or that would cause some type of conflict, like you were friends with one of the attorneys.
Jury panel, thank you for showing up here today. I'm the judge in this case, and prior to starting, I need to ask you a few questions to make sure that you're able to serve on the jury. This case involves an alleged burglary. Mrs. Smith was in her house one night, and she heard the doorbell ring. She was getting ready to take a shower, and she didn't want to open the door, so she went ahead and took a shower. When she finished with the shower, she stepped outside the bathroom, and she could see downstairs, and she saw a young white male with a black t-shirt on that she described as being 6 foot tall and weighing about 180 in her house, and she didn't know who he was. She screamed. She ran back into her bedroom, locked the door, and called the police. Officer Jones shows up a couple of minutes later, and he determines that whoever it was had crawled through a dog door in the main door in the residence. The Officer Jones started driving around the neighborhood, and he saw a young, slender, white male with a black t-shirt on, and he stopped him and talked to him, and he appeared nervous. Mr. Jones put him in custody in his police car, drove back to Mrs. Smith's residence, and asked her to look out the window at the person in back of the squad car and tell him if that was the person that she had seen. She replied that she was certain that was the person that was in her living room. And on the basis of that evidence, he was arrested for burglary, and he's on trial here today. Based on what I have told you, have any of you heard anything about this case or seen anything about it on the news or heard anybody talking about it? None of you have? Do any of you know any of the witnesses in the case? Officer Jones, Mrs. Smith, the defendant, whose name is Dan Williams. And none of you know anything. Have any of you ever been convicted of a felony? No? All right. Are each of you a citizen of the United States? All right. can any of you think of any reason, based on what you now know about the people involved and the fact situation, do you know of any reason why you cannot serve as a juror in this case? All right. Based on that, the parties will start the voir dire process. And Counselor Radloff?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good day. How are you guys doing today? Pretty good? Has anyone served on a jury before? No, is this your first? That's good. You guys know what the process is? Yeah. Okay, well that's good, because I'm going to explain it to you here in just a little second. Myself and my defense counsel, the defense counsel over here, are going to ask you some questions, and we're going to try and determine whether or not that you would be a good fit for this trial for this case. We both have different points of view, and we're going to be looking to see if we can kind of search that out. Is that going to be okay with you guys? I don't want you to be nervous. You're not on trial. Okay, you're just here to help. You're doing your civic duty, and I appreciate that. My name is Richard Radabaugh, and I'm a prosecutor, and I represent the people of the state of Colorado. And that's my job here, is to represent you, the citizens, in any kind of case that involves the state versus the defendant. So I'm going to ask you some questions. I don't want anyone to be nervous. I just want some honest answers. Ms. Horton, have you ever been scared in your life?
Yes.
Have you ever been, let's say, what was your most scared moment in your life?
Probably when I got in a car accident.
Okay. How long ago was that?
About 6 months ago.
Okay. Do you remember every detail about that, or most of the details?
Yeah.
And what time of day was that?
In the afternoon.
In the afternoon? And where were you going?
To meet my parents at the car dealership.
Ah, so you're buying a new car that day.
Yes.
Did you buy a new car?
No.
Because you wrecked your,
Yes.
your trade-in. Hopefully you got a new car eventually.
Not yet, but
Still?
yeah.
What kind of car hit you?
A smaller car.
Do you remember what color it was?
No.
You don't? Okay. How about you, Mr. Wagner? Have you ever been scared? Okay. When was the last time you were scared?
I don't know.
Think about it. What was your most scary event in your whole life? Even if it was a child.
I don't know.
Can't think of one?
No.
Then you've never been scared, right?
I guess. No.
Okay. Do you remember what you did on your last birthday?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk about that.
Oh, I was working,
Where?
work at the club at Flying Horse.
Mm-hmm.
Was working
Good
at,
steaks there?
yeah, from what I've heard, I've never eaten there.
Oh, really? You just worked there, but
At the
never ate there?
restaurant, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I worked, and it was the overnight shift, so it went over into my birthday. I got off work at 7 o'clock, went home, went to bed until like 2 o'clock, and then drove back to my parents' house in Buena Vista, Colorado. Did a birthday dinner, some cake, and went to bed.
Okay. What did you do last Wednesday? What'd you have to eat? Can't remember?
Nope.
Can you remember what you ate for your birthday?
Yes,
What was it?
fried chicken.
Okay. Ms. Dunwoody, tell me about the time you were scared. Were you ever scared?
Probably when my family and I packed up in the middle of the night and left my dad.
Okay, that would be scary. How old were you?
13.
Do you remember that completely?
Yeah.
Long time ago, though?
6 years ago? 7 years ago? 6.
Do you remember like it was yesterday?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can remember when I was a little kid, I'm in my 60s, I can remember I left my window open, I didn't have a screen, and the neighbor's cat came over while I was sleeping, jumped through the window and landed right on my chest. And I can remember that today just like it was yesterday. Do you think eyewitness accounts, Ms. Pryor, do you think eyewitness accounts can be inaccurate?
Yes.
Do you also think they could be very accurate?
Yes, depending on the situation.
Okay, tell us about that.
Like, I feel like depending on the amount of trauma and like it could cause them to forget some things.
Okay. Do you think, though, that we just talked about that, there's been memorable experiences where they don't forget? Do you think you would forget something like that?
I don't think I would forget the event itself, but specific details could probably be blurry.
Okay, that's fair enough. And what kind of details do you think would be blurry?
Just like smaller details, like whether an incident, like the color of the other car, or like what type of vehicle it was. Usually you're just concerned about your own life in those situations that you may not remember.
Exactly, but Ms. Horton, if I was to bring that car in here right now, do you think you would recognize it?
Probably.
You would recognize it if you saw it again.
Yeah.
But you can't remember it now because one of those small details is blurry. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Lyons, let me ask you this. Do you live in an apartment or a house?
I guess. I live in the dorms.
Okay, but you have a room, right?
Yes.
It's your room.
Yes.
And would you think of somebody that was in that room, do you think that would be a startling event that you didn't know, you didn't give permission to?
Yeah.
Would you be angry about that?
Yeah,
Would you want something done?
probably.
Okay. Now let me ask you one more question. If somebody's in your house without your permission and they rang the doorbell for you to answer the door and you didn't, and they crawled through the doggy door to get into your house, do you think they were there to help you out? To be nice?
No.
What do you think they would be doing?
Probably something bad. If I,
And you-
Come on,
let's
then.
kind of stretch that out. What kind of bad things do you think?
I don't know. It could be anything, honestly.
But nothing good.
Nothing. No.
Nothing good. Would you agree with that?
I agree.
How about you, Ms. Jennifer?
I would assume that they're there to commit a crime or to harm me in any way.
What other reason would there be?
That's about it.
That would be
If
the only
they're-
reason,
yeah,
right?
if they're not welcome.
They're not welcome, you didn't invite them in, they checked to see if you're home, all that. You think you would remember somebody if you saw them again 30 minutes later?
Yeah, but I think I would forget certain details. Because you're not really focusing on every detail when you're startled. You just try to be safe.
Have you ever had to call 911 and give them a description over the phone?
No,
You've never tried to do that?
no,
Right after you've been scared?
no.
What do you think that experience would be like?
Intimidating, I guess, because you don't want to like identify someone incorrectly.
Do you think you would be prone to make a mistake at that moment?
I guess if the operator asked leading questions, you might make a mistake. But,
Okay, all right. Could you pronounce your last name for the jury?
Cherry.
Chariot. I was calling you Schwab. Chariot, Mr. Chariot. Have you ever been scared?
Yeah,
Tell us about the last time you were scared.
I was in 5th grade and there was a tornado by my house and like there was about 3 trees that fell right by my house.
And you remember that? What time of day was that?
It was probably in the evening.
Okay. And you remember that real well.
Yeah,
Who was with you?
me and my younger brother and my older sisters.
None of your parents were there?
No,
Okay, and you remember that?
yeah,
Do you have a clear memory of that?
it's pretty clear, yeah.
You look older than 5th grade. How long ago was that?
That was more than 10 years, I think.
So, and that memory is just like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Mr. Wagner, coming back to you. What do you think there would be a reason for someone to crawl through a doggy door to somebody's house if they think nobody's home?
To probably take something.
Okay, do you have a concept of what circumstantial evidence is?
Yeah,
Tell me what your concept of circumstantial evidence is.
evidence that doesn't point clearly to something, but just says that it's reasonable to think that this could have happened.
Okay, that's a pretty good definition. But do you think that circumstantial evidence, if there's enough of it, it can take you beyond a reasonable doubt?
Yeah,
Okay. And how about you, Ms. Dunwoody? Do you know what circumstantial evidence is?
About the same as Jonathan said.
Okay, but let's look at that. You know, everybody says, oh, this is a circumstantial case, you know, you can't convict on a circumstantial case. But evidence is evidence. Did you know that? Evidence is evidence. Doesn't matter if it's circumstantial, it's testimonial, it's physical. What kind of evidence would you like to see in this case?
whatever evidence the jury or the prosecution has to offer.
No, but what kind do you want to see? If you were gonna put together a case and you were gonna pick some kind of evidence, would you want DNA?
No?
No?
Well, I mean, I would want enough to know that, for sure, that that person committed the crime.
And what would you need for that? What would you need? Ever watch TV?
Yes?
One of my favorite shows is CSI Miami. You ever see that?
No, because I don't care for that one.
Oh, it was great, because all the girls in bikinis and stuff.
I'm a jury guy and I'm a girl, so.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. We used to have a drinking game. Every time Horatio would take his sunglasses off, you'd have to take a drink. You get blasted by the end of the show. We'll have that as well. So anyways, what kind of evidence would you like to see?
Probably physical evidence would be the best,
You would like that?
yeah.
And when you say physical evidence, are you talking fingerprints, DNA,
Yes.
photographs?
Photographs would probably help if she took a picture of him and then said,
Well, what if none of that exists? Can you still convict somebody?
I think so, it would just be more difficult.
Okay, all right. Anybody else has any feelings about this case where they don't think that they can serve justice? Anybody? No? Pass the jury. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Joseph. I'll be doing the defense. But before I do that, I'd like to get to know you guys a little bit better and ask you some questions. We're here obviously to try this case, and we don't want to put anybody behind bars who might be innocent given lack of evidence. Who's Davis Powers? Davis Powers?
No, he didn't show up.
Okay. Janae Chavez? In your questionnaire, you said that you had a problem being fair and impartial if there were dismembered murder victims as evidence to serve fairly. Is that correct?
Correct.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I guess seeing pictures of how brutal the act was would make it difficult to, I guess, decide that someone's innocent in some how.
How would it make it more difficult?
Because you would see the act and how violent they were as a person, so it would be hard to, like, judge them lightly.
And you would equate that as part of their personality?
Correct.
Is there anybody that kind of agrees with that? That seeing pictures would maybe change your opinion on the severity of the crime? No? Okay, Jonathan Wagner?
Yeah.
Hi. It says you're a manager of a country club and your father's a police officer for 30 years. Lock your doors, right?
Yep.
But you said it'd be difficult to give equal weight if there was a law enforcement officer testifying. What do you mean by that?
I believe that that a police officer would be more trustworthy and more likely to tell the truth than a regular person.
So you would trust that police officer's word over anybody else's, what you're saying?
Yes.
Do you think that would affect your ability to be fair and impartial as a jury member?
If we have to take everybody's word at the same level, then yes.
So you'd probably side with the police officer most likely, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Mackenzie, no, you're wearing your glasses, of course. You also said that it would be a problem for you to be fair and impartial in your questionnaire, serving on a jury, based on your eyesight. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Just if I didn't have glasses on or contacts. I usually wear contacts, but.
So would you say that without your glasses, you have a limited vision then?
Yes.
Do you think that having a limited vision would impair your ability to be accurate on what you see?
Yes, if I
If
don't
your
have my
vision was
glasses.
maybe partially blinded?
Yeah, if I
Is that
don't
what you
have
mean by
glasses.
that?
Yeah.
Okay. Alexandra, you said you were a victim of a crime. Would you like to explain what you mean by that? In
Oh,
your
that was
questionnaire?
actually the car accident.
The car accident?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All right, I just wanted a little bit more clarification on that. And Michael? Is Michael here?
No.
Okay. Never mind. Thank you for those. Who remembers, or, we might be a little young for this jury panel, but does anybody remember 9/11? Do you remember where you were? No? I got some no's over here? Who does vividly remember? Do you remember? So you remember where you were on 9/11?
Yeah,
Do you remember what you were wearing?
I do not.
No? What about you? Do you remember what you were wearing?
No.
You don't remember what you were wearing? Do you remember what you ate? Okay. I have a story that I'd like to read, and I kind of want to feel some opinions from the room here. My neighbor actually shot a rabbit in her yard. There were missing vegetables in the garden, and she saw rabbit prints in the snow. So she took action and she killed the first rabbit that she saw. Who here thinks that that kind of action is justifiable? Who here thinks that it's not justifiable? Why?
Because the rabbit needs to. I don't know.
Well, what I mean by justifiable is who here thinks that shooting the rabbit, she was correct in shooting the correct rabbit, or culprit? Do you think? Because there were rabbit prints in the snow. Does that make sense that a rabbit would have taken the vegetables? You shaking your head, yes, why?
Because rabbits eat food.
Because rabbits eat food? Okay. Who here thinks that that's not a smoking gun? That it was the rabbit? You? Why would you say that?
Well, if there were just rabbit prints, she didn't see the rabbit actually eating the food, so she can't.
Does it make a difference if there are no rabbit prints at all? Well, what kind of difference does that make?
Then you don't know.
Does it make
What
it
it
even
was.
harder if there's no rabbit prints to find out who was taking the vegetables, right? Is there anybody who disagrees that it would be harder without the rabbit prints? Okay. Is it safe to assume a defendant innocent until proven guilty then? Is that something we should all do as jury members, to assume that the person on trial is innocent until proven guilty? Does anything about the story that you've heard from what you know about the case, is there anything that could make the defendant look more guilty? And nothing that comes up in your mind. What if the witness who had testified that that was the person who had entered her home, would it make it look more guilty if that person was in handcuffs when she did the identification? No? Why not?
Doesn't really change what the person looks like.
Okay. Would it make a difference if the person was sitting down when the identification was made?
Oh, yeah, I guess it could, because
How?
she gave a height, and it's hard to judge height if somebody's sitting down.
Yeah. What about in a vehicle, sitting down in a vehicle? Would that make it more difficult? What kind of things would not be available to you as an identification from that kind of vantage point?
Clothing.
Clothing?
Light.
Light? Maybe? Do you think that that would be limited vision? So would a person sitting down in handcuffs behind a door from a distance from the person who was making the identification, who was also behind a window, would that be a solid, in your opinion, would that be a solid identification of a person? What kind of identification would you want to have of a person to make it most legitimate? Anybody? What do you think?
Probably like if you went back to the place and put the person in the same exact position that he was in when the lady saw.
Would that be the only way? If I said there's a suspect on campus, the suspect is female with light brown hair and about 5'4". Do you think I could find someone like that within 2 minutes on campus if I walked outside and came back in? You say no? What do you think?
So very
You think it's
general.
more?
Yeah,
You think it's what?
it's a general description.
How so? How's that general?
There doesn't have any defining feature that could single out someone.
Would a defining feature be better in identifying a person?
Yes.
Okay. Who here has lost something and thought that maybe for a small period of time that someone else took it? Anybody ever been in that position? You? At any point in time, did you think it was somebody else? Did you have a person in mind who might have taken it from you? And were you wrong?
Yeah.
What ended up happening? Did you actually have it and find it?
Yeah.
So you were wrong and you made a mistake. But you were convinced at the time that someone had taken it. Okay. What about you? Has that ever happened to you? Have you ever walked into a room and forgot why you walked in there?
Yes.
And what did you do?
Thought about it for a while.
Just thought
Why
like, what am I
did I
doing? Am I
come in
losing
here?
my memory? I'm getting Alzheimer's? What's going on here, right? Does that kind of thing happen like frequently or?
Sometimes at work, I'll be like, my work is kind of fast paced, and sometimes I'm like, what was I doing? Like, what am I supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
So.
Who here has that not happened to? Nobody. Okay. Who here is, well, let me ask this question. If I'm smart, and people know I'm smart, does that mean I'm going to make an A in my classes?
No.
Who says no? Why not?
Because it doesn't necessarily mean that you know the stuff that you're being taught. And what if you just think that you're smart and you're not paying attention?
So being smart doesn't necessarily mean that you'll make an A.
No.
Okay. Does having a brain then, does that mean that I have a good memory? I have a brain? No. Is it correct to assume, and this is a little off topic, would it be correct to assume then that birds with wings and feathers, any bird with wings and feathers can fly? Because there's obviously birds with wings and feathers that can't fly, right? I'm not going to name them. Well, I can't think of all of them. Okay, well, has anybody ever waved at anybody and then realized, oh, that's not the person I thought I was waving at? Can we raise our hands if that's true? Okay, everybody? Okay, is it possible then for people to make mistakes in that kind of scenario? Might they pretend to wave anyway, like they meant, oh, I just meant to do that anyway, because I know I'm wrong? Would you be embarrassed? Were you embarrassed when you were wrong?
Yeah.
What about you? Were you embarrassed? Who wasn't embarrassed when they made a mistake? No, everybody was embarrassed when they made a mistake. Okay. Would it be embarrassing if a person makes a mistaken identity, not looking their best at the time that they made the mistake? Would that be embarrassing? So if you waved at somebody, you knew it was the wrong person, would it make it more embarrassing if you were also having a bad hair day that day? Or is that irrelevant?
It's irrelevant.
It's irrelevant. Who thinks it's irrelevant? Or not irrelevant? Okay. That's interesting. So it doesn't increase the level of embarrassment by any degree? By having these other factors? Who here's a sports fan? Anybody like basketball?
Yeah.
Like basketball? Okay, you know the rules of basketball?
Yeah.
Alright, so in a game of basketball, you got 5-on-5 players with 2 hoops at either end, right?
Yeah.
During play, a positional player can accidentally make a pass and turn the ball over, right? Typically when this happens, a lot of times they come back at the other end of the court and they play aggressive defense and end up getting a foul. Oftentimes this term is called a frustration foul. Have you heard of that? A frustration foul. Why do you think that happens?
I think it's just to like slow down the momentum of the game.
Slow down the momentum of the game. Could it also be that he was upset with himself?
Yeah.
So, because he was upset with himself, he had a lack of judgment on the other end of the court committing a foul. This happens, how often would you say that kind of thing happens in basketball?
A lot.
Do you think that happens in real life too? Where people make mistakes and then they try to make up for it? Maybe make up for some sort of embarrassment? The embarrassment alone could be the mistake itself, right? Okay. What about referees? You ever seen a referee make a call, and then they show the replay, and it's obviously wrong?
Yeah.
Who here's seen that? Who here hasn't seen that? Everybody's seen that kind of thing? So even professionals who are trained can get things wrong sometimes, right? Can anybody admit? I know there's a lot of people on the panel who have law enforcement officers in their family. Can they admit that sometimes cops can be wrong too? Not all the time. Not even most of the time, but sometimes they can be, right? Anybody disagree? Okay. If I were to say I was on the moon last week and I had lunch, who here would say I'm a liar? Everybody. Why do you think I'm lying?
Because very few people have gone into space just to have lunch.
Yeah. Could I not have my own rocket ship?
I mean, you could, but you have to be like extremely wealthy and have all the training to go to space.
Yeah, I suppose so. Who else said? Everybody? Everybody said I was wrong, right? So just because I believe in my mind that I had lunch on the moon last week, doesn't make it true, does it? Even though, in my mind, I'm convinced that I had lunch on the moon. Everyone else thinks I'm wrong. But they have their reasons, right? You have a reason. Your reason might be a little different than hers. So, if something is admissible, let's say like a person's testimony, for example, does that make it true then? Just because we bring it into the conversation. Is everything in a jury trial that's said true or accurate? Do you think? Who here thinks that there might be some windows of error when people are talking about their stories and what they say? What makes you raise your hand?
Sometimes people remember things incorrectly, or they don't say it correctly the first time and like try to fix it, so it makes it less believable.
Less believable? What about someone over here? You said also?
Yeah, like, I guess there's different factors that make someone, like, you believe that they did something or saw something that didn't happen.
What about a vantage point? Would that be a significant element in someone's memory? What kind of vantage point would you say is the best for identifying someone? Do you know what I mean by when I say vantage point?
Can you break it
So
down?
what kind of positional arrangement would you say? Like, if you were looking at me directly, from afar, close up, at an angle, from below, from top, where would you say you would get the best view of me? If you wanted to identify me.
Directly?
Directly?
Yeah,
Even ground?
yeah, that would help.
Okay.
2 minutes, Counsel.
Thank you. So, if something was not like that, if something was off, would you think that that would be a solid, positive identification then?
No, not 100%.
No.
I still think that you still might be right even if you were at an angle.
Couple more questions here. If I have an NBA player, your average size NBA player, sliding down a chimney, what kind of evidence would you expect that that person was there? Would you expect to see physical evidence?
Yes.
You would? What about you? Is it possible that someone could go through that small little hole and not leave anything behind? Not even a mark? No physical evidence at all?
It just seems unlikely.
Unlikely?
It's possible that those marks could go.
We talked about probably earlier during the first line of questioning. If someone probably did something, is that enough to put them in jail? What would be enough? I saw you shaking your head.
Without a doubt.
Just without a doubt? solid proof. Okay. Well, thank you for answering my questions.
Okay, we're done. You guys take a break, and we're going to have a little discussion, because you got another panel to go through. So if you guys can step out just for a few minutes, I'll engage you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. I want to thank you for showing up and doing your civic duty today. Today, we're going to do voir dire. This is the first thing in a jury trial. This is where both sides, the prosecution and the defense, get to ask questions of the jurors before they're seated and sworn in. Before we get started, let me give you some facts of this case that you're going to be listening to today. It is a burglary, whereas someone has entered somebody's residence illegally. In this case, a woman was home. Her name is Mrs. Smith, and she was getting ready to take a shower. It was the middle of the day, and the doorbell rang. She didn't answer the door because she was getting ready to take a shower, so she went and took her shower. She was coming out of her bedroom. She was walking upstairs, and she happened to look down, and she could see into the kitchen, and there was a white male, black shirt, standing in her kitchen. She let out a huge scream, ran back in the bedroom, locked the door, called the police. Officer Jones showed up a few minutes later, checked the house. The man that she saw was gone. He determined that the only way to get in, because all the doors and windows were locked, was an unlocked doggy door, small doggy door, going into the kitchen from the backyard. Officer Jones then drives around the neighborhood. A couple blocks away, he spots someone that generally matches the description that Mrs. Smith had told the dispatcher of what this individual looked like. He contacted this party. He appeared to be nervous, put him in his backseat of his car, drove him back over to Mrs. Smith's house. She was able to look into the backseat of the car and positively identify this is the individual that had entered her house illegally. He was arrested, and now we are here trying that case. His name is Dan Williams. Does anyone know that name, Dan Williams? How about Officer Jones? How about Mrs. Smith? Is anyone any problem with that? Has anyone heard anything about this case, read about it in the newspapers, know anything about it? Many of your friends have talked about it? Okay. Has anyone ever been arrested for a felony or convicted of a felony on this jury? How about, are we all citizens of the United States? Does anybody have a reason why they can't serve, other than what I've already asked? Work, commitments, nothing? Okay. Then I'm going to turn it over to the jurors. Prosecution is going to go first. Counselor?
Hello, my name is Amber Peterson, and I'm the prosecutor in this case. It's my job during this process, known as voir dire, just to ask you all a series of questions. These are not in any way to pry into your personal lives, but simply to kind of give me the ability to determine if you all will be able to remain fair and impartial during this entire process while you're serving on the jury. Is that okay with you all? Janae, I'd just like to start with you. Would you like to tell me how you might know if somebody is lying?
I guess it takes them longer to say what they want to say. They say a lot, and they just seem like nervous about it, and the facts don't add up.
Okay, you said they seem nervous about it.
Yeah.
Would you say that there are like actual nonverbal cues that might give away the fact that somebody is lying?
Yeah, they might be like looking away and not being confident in their body posture.
Would you say that those kind of things are a sign of guilt
Yes.
normally? Thank you. How about Mackenzie? Do you believe that field identifications are usually accurate?
I guess it depends on where you are and, like any kind of, like we were talking about vantage points and the person's eyesight, all that kind of stuff. All the
So can you give me some examples of when you believe a person would be accurate?
Yeah, if it's a good amount of space, like you and I, and if they can see properly, if they didn't only look for like a second, I guess,
Okay.
and look longer.
Okay, thank you. Kayla, if I was standing at the top of a balcony, say, at my apartment, and you came to study with me for an exam, and before today I had never seen you at all, or before the time that you came to an apartment, I'd never seen you at all, and you come up and I'm on the second floor on the balcony, and I look down at you, but only for a few seconds, do you think that 5 minutes later, without having seen you, I'd be able to kind of identify you?
You may be able to identify like, what I was wearing and maybe like my hair color, but I don't know if you'd be able to identify my face.
Would you say that because I was standing above you and looking down at you, it kind of had, gave me a disadvantage that I wouldn't be able to tell exactly how tall you are
Yeah, I'd probably skew that a little bit.
from being up higher? So are any of you all still a little bit confused as to what circumstantial evidence means? Any confusion at all? Okay. Janae, do you want to kind of explain to me what circumstantial evidence is? I just want to make sure you have a good grasp of it.
So it's evidence that doesn't like directly like point to a certain fact. It can be like applied to a case, but it's not definite.
Okay, so what kind of evidence, what are examples of evidence that would be considered circumstantial but not physical?
Like eyewitnesses. It's like all I can really think of.
Just because I remember when I was in my American jury system class and I was asked if I knew exactly what circumstantial evidence was, I was kind of afraid to raise my hand about it. So just to make sure that you guys all have a clear understanding of it, I'm just going to draw a little bit of a picture to try to get your minds going about circumstantial evidence. So say you're standing in front of a frozen lake, and you're looking at the lake, and in the middle there is a hole. And going up to this hole, you see footprints, and you know that they're rabbit footprints because they're really long and they kind of look like that. So looking at, if you were the person looking at this lake and see those rabbit footprints going up to the hole, but you don't see any footprints going away from the hole, where would you think the rabbit is?
In the hole.
In the hole. Brianna, why do you think he's in the hole?
Well, there's nothing coming back, so he's probably in the hole or got eaten by a bird, I guess, I don't know.
Or got eaten by a bird? Maybe the bird flew into the hole?
Sure.
So you'd say that there's some possibility that the rabbit's not in the hole. Okay. Well, this would be an example of circumstantial evidence. You didn't see him go into the hole, but all the circumstances lead you to believe that that is where the rabbit is. You don't have a picture or any bunny DNA, but you can probably assume that the rabbit's in the hole, considering there's no feet print going away from it, right? With this being said, do you think that circumstantial evidence can be helpful in determining the facts of a case, Martin?
No, not really.
No, you don't think so? So you would need to see physical evidence in order to convict somebody? Okay. Are there any times that you would just take somebody's word for it?
No.
You think that you definitely have to have physical evidence in order to say that somebody is guilty of a crime? Thank you. Who here watches shows that involve criminal investigations, NCIS, Bones, Law and Order? Everyone here almost? Do you?
Yeah.
You do as well? What shows do you guys watch? Too many? Like, what's your favorite one?
Criminal Minds.
Criminal Minds. Have any of you guys seen The Night Of? Really? I haven't seen too many people that have watched that one. You'll have to look into it. The Night Of's really good. But do you think that these shows are dramatic and over the top? Okay. Do you think that physical evidence is necessary to convict somebody? Like sometimes, like they make it seem so in the shows?
Are you asking if we agree with that, or if they?
Yeah, if you agree with it. No. So you would say that physical evidence is not always needed? Because sometimes the shows kind of make it feel like there's always going to be evidence at a crime. No matter what, you're going to go in and find a piece of hair or a footprint. But a lot of times in real life, that's not the case. So I just want to make sure that you are all on board that those things are not always necessary. Kayla, what is your opinion of police officers?
I respect them highly, and I see them as authority figures in our everyday life.
Do you think that they ever make mistakes?
Yeah, I mean, everyone makes mistakes.
About what percentage of the time?
I think it's a lot less than media likes to portray it.
So you think the media likes to make it seem like police officers make a lot more mistakes than they really do?
Mhm.
So you'd say maybe like 10% or less, but not very often. They're usually very reliable, right?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Do you think that law enforcement officials are fair in general, Jonathan?
Yeah.
They usually are. Have you ever had any contact with police officers? And what was that experience like?
Just like talking to any other person.
Were you getting in trouble at the time, or just having a conversation with a police officer that you ran into? What was the reason for your conversation?
I've been a witness in things before, and yeah, just casual conversations. My dad was also a cop though, so
Your dad was a cop.
cops were in my house a lot.
Has he ever told you any stories about some of the events that happened or that he had to deal with?
Not really, my dad doesn't talk much.
He didn't talk too much about it, so he's never talked about maybe any potential burglaries or anything like that. But has anyone had a negative experience with a police officer? No. Has anyone ever been accused of doing something wrong by a police officer? And can you tell me about that experience?
They thought they had video of me going into a bathroom at my high school and smoking marijuana, but it wasn't me. And so I was sitting there being questioned by the cops.
So when they questioned you, did you get nervous at all, or like?
Yeah. Well, I was mostly like angry, and then I started crying, and they thought I was guilty because I was crying, but I was just really angry.
You were angry that they had
Yeah.
accused you even though you weren't?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you say that most of the time, if somebody is extremely nervous, that they would be guilty?
No.
Not always?
Not always. If they're nervous, they're not always guilty.
So you think that you might have a nervous reaction
I mean,
just
I know I
regardless?
was nervous, even
Yeah.
just with a police officer in front of me accusing me of something.
Okay. Thank you. Amanda, do you think defendants are sometimes wrongfully convicted?
Yes.
Sometimes. But do you think the courts usually decide correctly?
Yes.
Yes. Brianna, do you agree that when you're in fear, you have a heightened sense of awareness?
Yeah.
So you think that you notice more things that are going on around you?
I mean, I might notice more things at that time, but I don't know if I'd be able to recall all of them.
What if it was just like 2 minutes later?
I mean, you kind of have an adrenaline rush, so I mean, I don't know if you'd remember all of it.
So you think that when you have an adrenaline rush, you actually have less sense of memory?
Well, I think like in the moment, you'd probably be able to like see more of what's going on, but when you try to remember it, you may not have like all the pieces there.
Okay. What about you, Amanda? Do you think that you have a kind of a heightened episodic memory when you're in fear? Or do you think that,
Yes, but I think you focus on specific things and you can't remember every detail.
okay, so if you were walking on a street and you kind of were fearful of somebody because they seemed like they were following you on the other side of the street, what kind of things would you remember about that person?
Maybe how fast they were going.
How fast they were going? What kind of physical characteristics?
Maybe if it seemed like a large man or maybe even a woman.
But you'd definitely be able to kind of tell about how tall they were?
Yeah.
Kayla, have you ever been a victim of robbery?
Yeah.
No, you have not. Has anyone here ever had anything stolen from them? Before? Martin, if an officer randomly came up to you on the street and asked you what you were up to, would it make you nervous, even if you weren't doing anything wrong? It would still make you nervous, even if you weren't doing anything? Do any of you have any female friends or family members who live alone? How many of them have security systems or things that keep them safe? None of them?
Like locks?
Like,
Anything? Or
yeah, like a security system, not just their locks. Do any of you get kind of worried about them living alone sometimes? So, what kind of things do you think that people should have in place in order to keep themselves protected, like those women that are alone? Just their locks, or what would make you feel more comfortable?
If I was living on my own,
You said that you were, you sometimes got nervous about that woman in your family that
probably if they had a gun and know how to use it.
that would make you feel more safe.
5 minutes.
Kayla, you said, sorry, Kayla, you said that you carry pepper spray and firearms on you for protection in your jury questionnaire. At what times do you think that those are, at what times do you always carry those on you?
Well, I always have my pepper spray on me, like anytime I go anywhere, it's connected to my keychain for my vehicle, so
Okay,
it's just
and
always available.
are there any times that you are, that you carry a firearm on you for protection?
Typically when I go hunting.
When you go hunting, okay, so it's more for protection from animals.
Yeah.
Alexandra, you said you've been a victim of crime, which one?
I was in a car accident.
You were, oh, that was the car accident you were talking about. Amanda, you said your uncle was a police officer in Florida. Has he ever told you any stories about that he's been out with? And one last question for Brianna. You said that you know, or you said that you took a course titled Constitutional Law. Was that in college?
Yeah.
And can you tell me the most memorable thing that you took away from that?
It was 3 years ago.
It was 3 years ago?
I don't know, it was a class that I enjoyed a lot.
You enjoyed it, and why did you?
Because constitutional law is like something I'm interested in learning about.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are you, you definitely believe that we need to follow the Constitution, right? And make sure that everyone gets their rights.
Yeah.
Right, okay, good. All right, those are all the questions I have for you. I'll pass the jury.
Hello, how's everybody doing today? Sweet. Well, like you said earlier, my name is David Gentry, and I'm the defense attorney in this case. So I just have a couple more questions to ask you guys. So, has anybody here wanted to avoid jury duty? No? Everybody wants to do their civic duty? Great. Can you think of anything that's happened in your life that reminds you of this case in particular? Any details? No? Sweet. Alrighty, let's see. Mr. Wagner.
Yeah.
Your father's been in law enforcement for 13 years, correct? Mm-hmm. Has he ever talked to you about a time where he got it wrong? He never has?
No, he
I
didn't.
know you said earlier that your father doesn't really tell you much about the case,
Yeah.
but nothing in particular about that. Does anybody else on the jury panel think that police officers sometimes do get it wrong? Yeah? And what are some of those examples that you could explain of how they get it wrong? Nothing?
I mean, I think it can happen at any point. I think that you can get like the wrong person because of a witness statement or anything like that. I think it can be a whole spectrum, but it just depends on.
And it doesn't make the officer a bad person. It's
No.
not like he did it intentionally, correct?
Right.
Yeah, it's just a mistake, right? I have a follow-up question for you. How good do you think you can see without your glasses on?
Close, good. Far, I'm okay. I can't read.
You can't read far away?
It depends on how far.
But if I was standing across this room, do you think you could identify me without your glasses?
I could tell how tall you were and what colors you were wearing, but not your face.
Okay. Let's see. Miss is it Chavez or Chavez?
Travis,
Your father or uncle is in the correctional?
my father.
Your father? Has he ever talked about somebody being in prison for a crime that they didn't commit,
No,
wrongfully convicted? So has he stated that the people that are there are guilty, or is it just that a conversation has just never been brought up?
we don't talk about it, so.
Is that his choice? He just wants to leave work at
Yeah.
home and family separate? Okay, I would definitely respect that. Let's see, do you expect the defendant in this trial to testify?
I mean, yes.
You do expect him to testify? By raising hands, how many people would expect him to testify? If he was, so we have one that says no. For everybody else that's on here, what is the reasoning behind that? Is it because innocent people talk? I'm sorry, am I not phrasing it well enough?
I think if you want us to remain like impartial, we'd have to hear both sides of the story, even if it's just hearing it from the prosecution or just hearing it from the person being convicted.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Do you find drive-up eyewitness identification reliable? So a police officer shows up at your house, a crime is taking place, somebody's in the backseat of that police car. Do you think that it's reliable? It's one guy, it's not 8 people. By show of hands, who thinks that's reliable? Well, I'm thinking of like, the stereotypical, go down to the police station, shows you 8 photos, or shows you 8 guys behind a one-way mirror. Do you think that's a little bit more credible than a drive-up? We got one guy, is this the guy?
I think it would be more credible to do the lineup instead of just showing one person.
Who would agree with, I'm sorry, I'm awful with names.
Amanda
It's Amanda?
wants, yeah.
Who would agree with Amanda on that? Good to know. Let's see. Could you find the defendant innocent, not guilty in this case, knowing that the suspect is still out there? If that makes sense? I don't know, maybe I didn't phrase it correctly. So, in this case, if you were chosen as the jury, and you found the defendant not guilty, would you expect the criminal justice system to have the actual offender in custody? Where you could find him, by raising hands, who would expect that we have another guy? Say it's not him, but we have another guy.
Or at least looking.
Yeah, definitely. Alrighty. Is there anything you heard today that would make it hard to equal the same amount of to give the same amount of fairness to my defendant as the prosecutor has given? No? Nothing? When if I use a draw? So this lake that this hole is in, I own this lake. This is my lake. Now there are bunny tracks going there. But would you feel comfortable if I brought you a bunny and said this bunny should die for being on my lake? Do you feel that this is strong enough evidence for me to make sure this bunny never returns to my property, to my lake?